I just sat through this movie on Amazon Prime, The Man from Nowhere, and I really wanted to talk a little bit about it because this is a really good example of a movie that I think really did not live up to its potential. For the first half an hour or so, I was very much invested. For the first half an hour, I found the characters incredibly I found the build up to the situation, the introduction of these characters, world building, this sort of establishing these establishing moments, like really building up who these people are, what the issues is, what they're going through. I found the first half an hour incredibly engaging, incredibly well handled, really well shot, great set design, great scenes, great direction. It was all around like a phenomenally well handled opening segment. But as the movie went on, it became more and more generic to the point where the very last one, it's just the very last scene is just some generic like, oh, I'm so thankful you're in my life kind of thing. It's very disappointing. Very underwhelming. I really liked. I can't emphasize this enough. I really liked the first half hour. I cannot think of a single movie I've seen in the recent past where I adored the first half an hour of a movie and then got increasingly bored as I went on, because like unfortunately once like the kidnapping happens, once we start establishing more and more of these characters, once like the actual plot of the film gets going, that's when it starts becoming generic. That's when it starts becoming boring. That's when it starts becoming uninspired and repetitive and just not all that interesting for the most part. Again, there are a couple of highlights. Like again, I don't feel like super angry at the movie or something, but this is something that really should have been great. Like I do think that if they had an actual movie to go along with like the incredibly well set up opening segment, this would have been great. Like I would have like been very happy with it. But as it stands, I really can't recommend this like at all. Like I personally just adored the opening, but other than that, so what happens to the opening? What makes it so good? Well, it essentially begins with this sort of opening segment where it sort of like establishes that the antagonists in the middle of like one of their operations of like in the middle of transporting drugs, right? They are selling some kind of drug to this person, and it ends up getting stolen by a third party, a dancer at this club who ends up taking it home to her young daughter. And these people eventually track them down and find them. And this guy, their next door neighbor, is sort of like becomes involved with the situation when they come down to him to ask him questions about her, and they end up kidnapping the girl just because they're also involved in child organ trafficking or something like that. Uh, they come down to this guy who gets involved, who starts beating the shit out of people. The police are useless, obviously. That is another point that I really wanted to bring up. The police in this just don't do jack shit. Like, have less characters in this. The police accomplish absolutely nothing. Like, what are they doing? Are they just fucking over black people? Like, they don't seem to like be dealing with the actual criminals at all. They just sit around with their thumbs on their ass, like talking about the protagonist, as opposed to like the actual child trafficking criminals in the fuck. It's ridiculous. Not a fan of that aspect at all. Like the police could have been cut out entirely. Focus on like the main characters. I think like the girl in this is great. Like this is the main reason I love the intro so much, is that like the relationship between the girl and the main hero, the guy, it's so well handled and so interesting, and I think honestly kind of a little bit unique because I this girl is like the daughter of like this drug addict, sort of like thought basically, who this really aggressive woman who just who seems to be completely unhinged, right? Who like makes these weird demands of her daughter, who like sort of pushes her to do things, who has like strange people over. Like you really, really, really feel for this girl, right? And you sort of understand why this guy is sort of like being nice to her in spite of all of his personal problems. Like his wife was murdered by I don't even fucking know who. Like like so this guy like forms this like little friendship with this girl who's like in an abusive household, and when she gets abducted, he sort of goes out and like tries to get her back. Um, it's The intro just does such a good job of like making this girl likable, of like building up this character as like some huge badass who's just not really interested in associating with these kind of problems. It doesn't really go anywhere. Like he kills a bunch of people, but it's kind of boring. He's honestly at his coolest in like the opening segments where he's not even really doing anything. Like when he's just like standing there staring at people, he's awesome. But when he actually like does stuff, it's for the most part kind of lame. Um, the girl is just so likable, and again like goes through a wide range of bullshit in this movie, from like being fucked with by her mother, being shit on by like the people around her. Apparently, like her entire school doesn't like her. According to her, like she has like apparently a criminal record. She steals stuff from stores because like she doesn't really understand. She's so young and has had these problems. This guy is literally the only person who cares about this girl, and she knows that, and everybody kind of understands that, and as a result, like you really end up feeling very very engaged with this character and really really care when she gets kidnapped. Now, and that you do care about her as it goes along. It does kind of develop realistically, where initially it's established that this girl is like doesn't really like her mother because she's a piece of shit. But like the instant things go wrong, like the only thing on her mind is like, where's mommy? Where's my mother? Like again, as terrible as her mom is, as horrible as she is, she's still a mom. You know what I mean? Like she says and does some pretty terrible shit, but at the very end, she's not going to harvest your organs and sell them on the black market. You know what I mean? She's not that terrible. Things can always be worse, I suppose, especially for little girls and in these kind of movies. Like the mom was such a well built up character for like I was expecting her to be a main character, honestly, because she was so interesting. Her actress was so good. She had so many good lines, so many memorable moments, and then she's killed off like not even halfway through, right? Like I remember when she like goes down to the pawn shop to talk to our protagonist, our hero, and like she gets really really aggressive with him because like apparently the girl isn't supposed to talk to him. Like apparently there's some like rumor that he's like a child molester or some shit, or maybe she just made it up to keep him away from him. To keep her away from him. Like we're not really. It's not really elaborated on, but like she's really angry. Then she gets flirty and angry again. Like it's a very Sundari-ish sort of thing. Like I think people who have known addicts, like serious, like unstable people, like people from this kind of background, like know this kind of behavior, know this kind of personality, know this kind of like attitude, um, and it was handled so well here. And I deeply wish, like the opening segments, like what made the opening so good is that it really created this really good character dynamic between the protagonist, the little girl, and her mom. Like they all have this really interesting sort of like relationship going on, where like the mom doesn't like the protagonist. Well, she doesn't want the kid to be with the protagonist, but she really really wants to bang the protagonist, and the protagonist doesn't give a shit about any of them. But like the little girl is just like a legit like really nice little girl who's bored into this really shitty household, right? Like with all these addicts, with all these addicts, and like all these like personal problems. Like again, you care about the little girl. Like there are. It's so well handled. It's so well shot. It has such a good build up. It just doesn't lead to anything. Like the protagonist, like I don't want to say he's more bark than bite because he does get things done, but when shit does get down, it gets kind of boring. Like nothing he actually does is all that fun or interesting. Like he just like looks intimidating, and usually that's enough. But a lot of times the fights in this aren't all that engaging. I was hoping like early on that it would turn into like a Yakuza like thing where this guy was like incredibly overpowered, incredibly OP, but it didn't really turn out that way. Um, like the character past a certain point, like his motivations don't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, well, I don't want to say they don't make sense. It's more like the progression. Characters come out of nowhere. Characters that he has a relationship, they're not really elaborated on. They're just kind of like people he knows from his past who help him get things. It's like for someone who's supposedly like having has social problems, like an inability to connect with other people because of like the tragic death of his pregnant wife. It's he seems to have an awful lot of friends. Like you know what I mean? It's just I don't know. Like the character looks so cool at first, but like as the film went on, especially after he cut his hair, like he began to feel more and more like a generic like action action movie protagonist. It was kind of underwhelming. Um, Again, I think this movie suffers from having too many characters. I don't care for the criminals for the most part; they're not all that interesting. Like, there's this guy who looks like I legit like think he must be like a Junji Ito character because like he has that same ridiculous smile that like evil Junji Ito characters have. Like I legit did not think this was a real thing that people actually did, but he has this like ridiculous like Joker smile. Like it just like it's that ridiculous thing where it's just like this really wide like toothless grin. I didn't think it was. I've never actually seen that on like a real person. I thought it was just like something Junji Ito did, but apparently like apparently it's like this guy can do it like in real life. Like are they gonna get this guy to be in like Uzumaki? Like I don't know. Like if they make a live action Uzumaki remake, right? This guy should be in it. I mean, he just pulls off that specific face so well. It's ridiculous. Like again, like a lot of the early bad guys are kind of interesting, but like again, like much like the main characters, they just become kind of boring later on. Um, the police are such a non-entity. I don't even know why they were involved. Like just have it be a revenge story. Like just say that like oh the police won't do anything because they're incompetent. Like that's all you need to do. Like you don't need these police. Like you don't need really honestly you don't even really need a that much of a backstory when it comes to this guy. Like the protagonist. Like just have him say that like yeah I my wife was murdered in an accident. Like that's it. Like well was murdered by this fucking truck. Just show the fucking truck. Like again like the two things that really stuck out to me like in the later half of the movie, after it became generic, is that like it really tried to make you think that the girl might actually get her eyes ripped off. Okay, so what they do in the second half is that this guy threatens the protagonist with like, yeah, if you don't give my brother back, I'm gonna take the girl and rip out her eyes. And then like the protagonist goes down there to see him, and it turns out he does happen to have a pair of eyeballs just sitting in a jar, and he rolls it over to them. And like the implication is that he really actually did rip out her eyes just to shit on this guy. And it's like holy fucking shit, that was delightfully brutal. And then like there's another scene where like it builds up like how happy the protagonist and his wife are that they're going to have a child, and then like the wife waves, and I'm not even kidding you. Like I don't even think there's a jump cut. Like I think immediately after she waves, a fucking truck just slams into her, like just runs into like the passenger side of the car she's in, and just straight up murders her. They don't show shit, but you know she's fucking dead, and it is brutal. It is great. Now the girl doesn't actually get her eyes removed. such a fake cop out. Like I really, really wish she like actually got her eyes ripped out. That sounds awful. Like yeah, I really wish this little girl got mutilated. Like I wish it happened just for the sake of like the brutality of it because it really was an effective moment. Like, but they didn't actually go through with it. Like, come on, like, don't be pussies. Like, come on, like, what are you gonna? Why do you need the girl to be intact? Like, kill the, like, fuck, again, it would set it apart, right, from other movies. Like, have the little girl go blind. Like, shit, Rambo: Last Blood. Like, the one good thing about that movie, I think I said about that movie, is that the girl does die in that. Like after getting raped by all these fucking cartel members. Like that was a really good moment in an otherwise like mediocre film, right? If it was a better written movie, it would have been very effective. And I do think this movie is like better written than Rambo: Last Blood. I do think it has a lot more good moments in it, but it does kind of like fall in like the same kind of pitfalls. Like it wants to be generic. It wants to be appealing to an audience. Like it doesn't want to be daring. It doesn't want to do anything new. It doesn't want to be inventive or like really go in on like these fucking child organ donors. It's just I don't know. There were plenty of things I liked about it, but in the end, it just comes down to like a very very generic action movie, and I think they could have done so much more with this concept. Like again, um, really make these characters shine. You know what I mean? Like yeah, sure, kill off the mom, but have her do more stuff. Like sure, like have the relationship between the protagonist and the little girl, but like incorporate it more into the plot. You know what I mean? Like after a certain point, it's just like, okay, he wants to get this little girl back because they're friends, and like the relationship doesn't really grow after that. Like imagine if like Yakuza Kiwame, you save Haruka, and then like you don't really the relationship doesn't really develop after that. You know what I mean? Like you don't become like you don't like nothing else happens. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it feels. Like she gets kidnapped, and you don't really have like revelations. Like you don't really have like you don't really have this moment where this guy like really acknowledges how much this how important this little girl is to him, or like she doesn't really care about him at all. Like she's mostly just wants her mom back, which is kind of understandable. But um, again, this could have been so good. Like it could have been really good. I don't know. It says it has 4.5 stars on Amazon Prime. I guess some people liked it. I mean, I enjoyed it. Right? Like there were things about it I enjoyed, but it could have been a lot better.